We all focus on similar lists to protect our health. Eat well, exercise, don't smoke, stay away from alcohol. These are the golden rules of physical health. However, in recent years, the medical world has added a much more insidious and invisible enemy to the top of this list: loneliness. Massive research reveals that the damage chronic loneliness inflicts on our body is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Yes, you heard that right. Even if you've never smoked, if you feel socially isolated, your biological clock may be ticking as fast as a smoker's. Loneliness has become an epidemic in the modern world. And this isn't just a matter of emotional dissatisfaction. It's literally a deadly condition. Scientists say loneliness is as harmful as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. But how is this possible? How can a social feeling become a physical threat? To understand the answer to this question, we need to delve into the depths of evolutionary biology, recent findings in neuroscience, and debunk some deeply rooted misconceptions about human nature. First, we need to clarify this. Loneliness and being alone are not the same thing. This distinction is critical because these two concepts are constantly confused in popular culture. A monk living alone on a mountaintop and enjoying it may be alone but is not lonely. Conversely, someone living among millions of people in the shadow of skyscrapers, constantly interacting with others, can feel profoundly lonely. Loneliness is not an objective state but a subjective perception, a painful awareness of the gap between the social connections you have and the social connections you desire. So where does this feeling come from, and why is it so powerful? The answer lies in evolution. Humanity has been evolving for approximately 7 million years, and throughout most of this process, our chance of survival was directly related to the social group we belonged to. From Australopithecus to Homo erectus, from Neanderthals to modern humans, all our ancestors lived in groups. The reason is simple. A human alone on the African savanna is nothing. You cannot protect yourself from lions, leopards, or hyenas. You cannot kill large prey on your own. When you get sick or injured, there's no one to care for you. You cannot find the next generation to pass on your knowledge and experience. Being excluded from the group meant almost certain death. It was at this exact point that natural selection kicked in and installed a tremendous alarm system in our brains: the feeling of loneliness. Just as the sensation of pain alerts you to bodily harm and drives you away from danger, the feeling of loneliness alerts you that your social connections are weakening and forces you to take action. This is not a bug, it's a feature. But there's an important point here. Evolution doesn't work by looking backward. It doesn't plan forward. Evolution only responds to environmental pressures of the moment. Your brain is an organ that has been shaped over hundreds of thousands of years to live in hunter-gatherer groups of 50 to 150 people. In the modern world, most of us don't live under these conditions. We're among hundreds, thousands, even millions of people. But paradoxically, we've never felt more lonely. According to Pew Research Center data, the proportion of single-person households in developed countries has doubled in the last 50 years. Researchers from Brigham Young University found in meta-analysis studies covering more than 300,000 participants that loneliness increases the risk of premature death by 26 to 32%. This effect is equivalent to smoking, obesity, and physical inactivity, and according to some measures, even more harmful. But how? What's the mechanism? Because in science we cannot explain things with magic, we must provide a concrete, testable mechanism. This is where we need to look at neurobiology and immunology. Neuroscientist John Cacioppo from the University of Chicago and his team researched the biology of loneliness for decades and reached surprising conclusions. In lonely people, stress hormone cortisol levels remain chronically elevated. This alone is a problem because chronic high cortisol increases blood pressure, disrupts blood sugar, suppresses the immune system, and raises the risk of heart disease. But even more interesting, an increase in the activation of inflammatory genes and a decrease in the activation of antiviral genes were observed in lonely people. In other words, your body enters a low-level chronic inflammation as if it's constantly under attack and lowers its defenses against viral threats. The evolutionary logic of this is, for our ancestors, being excluded from the group would increase the risk of physical attack, fights, injuries, bacterial infections. Therefore, the immune system would be on alert for bacterial threats. But in the modern day, this alarm mechanism completely backfires because the threat we face is not physical assault, but social isolation and viral infections. The system is still running on old software, but the hardware has changed. This is where the power of science lies. It doesn't just say, loneliness is bad. It explains why it's bad, by what mechanisms it causes harm, which biological pathways it triggers at the molecular level. However, here we also need to debunk a widespread misconception in popular culture. Loneliness is not just a problem of weak-charactered people. This is a complete loaded question fallacy, placing a false assumption within the question and putting the person in a guilty position. The truth is, the feeling of loneliness is not an individual weakness, but an evolutionarily conserved universal human experience, just like hunger or thirst. No one asks a person, "Why do you feel hungry?" Is it character weakness? Right? Loneliness is in the same category, an evolutionary signal indicating the lack of something necessary for survival: social connections. Harvard's famous adult development study, ongoing for over 80 years, tracked the lives of thousands of people, and the conclusion they reached was crystal clear. The strongest determinant of happiness and healthy living is not money, not fame, not career success. It's quality social relationships. The quality of relationships in one's 50s predicted physical health in one's 80s. People who aged lonely experienced earlier cognitive decline, contracted more chronic diseases, and died at a younger age than those with strong relationships. However, here, we must also emphasize another scientific truth. Correlation does not mean causation. Does the fact that lonely people get sick more mean that loneliness made them sick? Or does it mean that sick people have difficulty socializing and become lonely? This is the classic chicken or egg problem. Fortunately, science can answer this question by conducting controlled experiments. Researchers tested the biological effects of social isolation in animal models, mice, primates, and the result was clear. Social isolation alone, even when all other factors are held constant, raises stress hormones, suppresses the immune system, and shortens lifespan. In humans, intervention studies showed that programs strengthening social bonds, group therapies, volunteering, social skills training, improve both psychological and physical health indicators. So the relationship is indeed causal. Now let's come to one of modern world's greatest paradoxes: technology, social media, instant messaging apps, video calls. We've never been this connected in human history. In theory, we can instantly communicate with anyone on the planet. So why has loneliness become an epidemic? Because your brain is looking for quality, not quantity. Our evolution is built on face-to-face, tactile, empathic, deep connections. An Instagram like, a Twitter reply, even a video call cannot replace physical togetherness. Neuroimaging studies show that while face-to-face social interaction triggers the brain's reward system, empathy circuits, and oxytocin release, screen-based interaction doesn't create the same effect. Moreover, social media creates a constant culture of comparison. You see everyone's best moments, happiest photos, most successful projects, and you compare your reality with the virtual reality others have curated. This creates a chronic sense of inadequacy through the mechanism psychologists call social comparison theory. Instead of spending time and energy building deep, meaningful relationships, we get stuck in superficial, numerical interactions. Here we should also add this: science is not definitive. It's open to debate. Some studies show that social media use in passive consumption form, just scrolling and looking, is harmful, but in active interaction form, commenting, sharing, using it as a tool to maintain real relationships, can be neutral or slightly beneficial. Data is still being collected. Long-term effects are still being researched. Scientific honesty requires not claiming we know everything, but accepting the limits of what we know. Now let's come to a very important question. What's the solution? If loneliness is this harmful and modern life is pushing us toward it, what should we do? Here too, science guides us but doesn't offer a magic solution, because there is no magic in nature, only mechanisms. The first step is recognizing the problem. Loneliness is not a source of shame. It's a universal human experience, and should be treated just like a physical illness. The second step is understanding that quality is more important than quantity. Having 1,000 superficial acquaintances is worth less than having 3 deep, reliable, reciprocal relationships. Research shows that for a person to be happy, they don't need a social circle as large as what's called Dunbar's number, approximately 150 people. As a close support group, 3 to 5 really close friends and a social circle of 15 to 20 people can be sufficient. The third step is moving from passive consumption to active participation. Research by anthropologist Robin Dunbar from Oxford University showed that synchronized activities like singing together, dancing, team sports trigger endorphin release in the brain and strengthen social bonds. The fourth step is valuing empiricism, that is, experience. Your intuitions might tell you people don't like me, I'm not worthy of being loved, but these intuitions of yours are often misleading, just like your eyes telling you the world is flat. Scientific methodology requires you to test your subjective feelings with objective experiments. Go out into social interaction, observe the results, revise your hypothesis. You'll often see that people are much more accepting and interested than you thought. Here, we also need to make a societal critique because loneliness is not just an individual problem, it's a systemic problem. Modern capitalist society creates atomized individuals. Traditional social structures, extended family, neighborhood, community, are dissolving. People are constantly moving for work, unable to establish rooted relationships. Working hours are increasing, free time is decreasing, public spaces are being privatized, places where people can gather freely and for free are disappearing. A society's architecture, urban planning, work culture, social safety net, all of these directly affect people's social connections. The United Kingdom established a Ministry of Loneliness in 2018 because they recognized the scale of the problem and its cost to public health. This is not just a matter of individual responsibility, but societal responsibility. Now let's come to perhaps the most important point. How can scientific methodology become a way of life? The tools we use when examining a complex topic like loneliness can actually be applied in all areas of life. First, the principle that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. If someone tells you this supplement will solve your loneliness overnight, approach with skepticism. Second, correlation is not causation. Two things occurring together doesn't mean one causes the other. Third, the search for mechanism. An explanation is only scientific when it can answer the how question. Trying to explain loneliness with universal energy attraction is not science. It's magic. Fourth, control groups and double-blind experiments, methods to eliminate our own biases. Fifth, peer review and community oversight. Science is not individual. It's a collective effort. Like the myth that Nikola Tesla invented everything alone, these false individualistic narratives in science history are contrary to the nature of science. Science progresses by building on Maxwell's equations, using Faraday's experiments, improving Edison's patents, as Isaac Newton said, by standing on the shoulders of giants. Loneliness research is also the product of data produced by hundreds of scientists over decades, studies that complement and correct each other. Finally, loneliness is not just an emotion. It's a survival signal your body sends you, and you should take this signal seriously. But at the same time, you should also close the door to pseudoscience, quick fixes, and conspiracy theories on this topic. You shouldn't believe claims like Big Pharma wants to sell your loneliness without looking for mechanisms, without demanding evidence. Scientific methodology is your... In conclusion, we are beings made of stardust, biologically dependent on each other. Evolution invented the pain of loneliness as a protective shield to keep us together. If your body is telling you that you're lonely, this is a warning just like your hand burning. Please don't ignore this warning. A healthy life is hidden not only in what you eat, but in who you eat with and how much you laugh at that table. How connected do you feel? Has the modern world made you lonely too? Let's meet in the comments because you're not alone here.